Imagine walking down a dark street over 100 years ago. It's midnight. The street lamps are dim, but ahead of you, you see a young woman walking home. She looks normal except for one terrified thing. She is glowing, literally glowing. Her hair shimmers with a pale, ghostly green light. Her dress sparkles in the darkness. Even her teeth shine when she smiles. The townspeople called them the Ghost Girls. They were the envy of every woman in the city. They were rich, they were beautiful, and they worked at the most glamorous factory in America. But the town didn't know the truth. The magic dust that made them glow wasn't beauty powder. It was radium, the most radioactive substance on Earth. The company told them it was safe. They told them it would put roses in their cheeks. They were wrong. By the time these girls realized the glow wasn't a blessing but a curse, their own bones had already started to liquidize inside their bodies. And the worst part? The company knew. To understand why these girls walked willingly into a death trap, you have to understand the world they lived in. The Great War was raging in Europe. Soldiers were dying in the trenches. And back home, most women could only find work as maids or seamstresses. It was hard, back-breaking labor for pennies. But then, a new factory opened in Orange, New Jersey, the United States Radium Corporation. They were hiring girls for a special job, dial painting. They had a new invention called Undark. It was a paint made with radium that glowed in the dark. The military needed thousands of watches painted with this stuff so snipers and pilots could see the time at night. It was the IT job. The studio was called the Elite Studio. It was sunny, clean, and filled with sunlight. And the pay? It was 3 times what their fathers made. One of these girls was Grace Fryer. She was 18, intelligent, and ambitious. When she got the job, she felt like she had won the lottery. "I got it! Mom, I got the job! I'm going to be making $15 a week! We can finally fix the roof!" Grace didn't know it yet, but she hadn't found a career. She had found a tomb. The work was delicate. The watch dials were tiny, some as small as a dime. To paint the numbers effectively, the brush point had to be needle sharp. But the bristles would fray after just a few strokes. The girls tried using water to sharpen the brush, but it diluted the expensive paint. They tried using rags, but it wasted too much material. So the supervisors taught the girls a specific cost-saving technique. It was called lip dip paint. "All right, ladies, listen up. This paint is expensive. We don't waste a drop. Here is the technique. Put the brush in your mouth. Use your lips to make a sharp point. Dip it in the paint. Paint the number. Lip, dip, paint." "Excuse me, sir. Is this stuff safe? I mean, swallowing it?" "Safe? Honey, you should be thanking me. Radium is the miracle cure of the century. Doctors prescribe it for colds. It cures cancer. It restores vitality. People pay good money to drink radium water at the spa. You're getting a free medical treatment every day." Grace trusted him. He was a scientist. He was wearing a suit. Why would he lie? So she put the brush in her mouth. It tasted gritty, a little metallic, like licking a battery. Lip, dip, paint. Grace painted 250 watches a day. That means she put the radioactive brush in her mouth 250 times a day, 6 days a week. She was slowly, methodically painting her own insides with nuclear waste. For the first few years, life was perfect. The girls became local celebrities. They were the Radium Girls. Because the dust was everywhere in the studio, it covered their clothes and skin. When they walked home at night, they literally lit up the street. They loved it. They embraced it. Before going out dancing on Friday nights, the girls would sneak jars of the paint home. They would paint their fingernails with the glowing green paste so they would shine in the dark jazz clubs. One girl painted her teeth so she would have a 1,000,000-watt smile that stunned the boys. They sprinkled the dust in their hair to look like angels. They were walking nuclear reactors. Grace Fryer was happy. She was engaged to a kind man. The future looked bright. But radium is a tricky killer. It is an imposter element. To the human body, radium looks exactly like calcium. They are chemically similar. So when Grace swallowed the paint, her body didn't reject it. Her body said, "Oh, look, calcium! We need this for the bones!" The body took the radium and built it directly into the skeleton. But it wasn't calcium. It was a microscopic machine gun, and once it was locked inside their bones, it started firing. A few years later, the glamour began to fade. It started with fatigue. The girls were tired, all the time. Then came the aches, not muscle aches, deep, boring bone pain. Grace Fryer went to the dentist. Her teeth were loose, not just one, but all of them. Her gums were bleeding and wouldn't heal. But the true horror happened to her friend, Molly Maggia. Molly went to a doctor complaining of a terrible toothache. Her face was swollen to the size of a grapefruit. The doctor decided to pull the rotting tooth. He injected the Novocaine. He grabbed the tooth with his pliers. He pulled gently. But the tooth didn't just come out. A piece of her jawbone came out with it. "My God, the bone, it's black, it's dry." Molly's jaw wasn't just broken, it was necrotic. It was dead tissue sitting inside a living body. A few weeks later, the doctor was examining the rest of Molly's lower jaw. He touched it gently with his finger to check for an abscess, and the entire jawbone snapped. It didn't break like a bone, it shattered like dried chalk. The doctors had to remove her entire lower jaw just to keep her alive. Molly Maggia essentially disintegrated. She died a few months later. She was only 24 years old. Her death certificate said she died of syphilis. Syphilis. That was the company's masterstroke. The United States Radium Corporation knew exactly why Molly died. They knew the paint was dangerous. How did they know? Because while the girls were licking brushes for 5 cents, the male scientists in the laboratory were wearing lead aprons. They used long ivory tongs to handle the radium tubes. They never put the brushes in their mouths. But when the girls started getting sick, the company didn't help them. They attacked them. They paid doctors to list the cause of death as syphilis. Why? Because in the 1920s, syphilis was a dirty disease. It implied the girls were promiscuous. It implied they were sinners. It shamed the families into silence. Grace Fryer's friends were dying, and the town was whispering that it was their own fault. Grace sat at home, unable to walk because her spine was collapsing under its own weight. She wore a steel brace just to sit up. She knew she wasn't a sinner. She knew she had been poisoned. She decided to fight back. Grace needed proof. She found an ally in a medical examiner named Dr. Harrison Martland. He was the first man to look past the lies. He had a theory. If the girls were radioactive, their breath would be radioactive too. He built a machine. A Geiger counter hooked up to a breathing tube. He asked one of the surviving girls to breathe into it. "Look at that. The needle. It's going off the charts." The girl wasn't just sick. She was exhaling radon gas. She was breathing out poison. Dr. Martland proved that the radium was deep inside their bones, emitting gamma rays that were destroying their blood cells. He proved it wasn't syphilis. It was homicide. Armed with this proof, Grace found a lawyer, a young, ambitious man named Raymond Berry. He filed a lawsuit. The trial became a global media sensation. The newspapers called Grace and her friends the Legion of the Doomed. Every day, the headlines updated the public on how many months the girls had left to live. It was a race against death. The company played dirty. They knew the girls were dying, so they tried to delay. They asked for extensions. They asked for postponements. Their strategy was simple. If the girls die before the verdict, the case is dismissed. "Your Honor, our key witness is in Europe for the summer. We request a postponement until September." "September? Your Honor, my clients might not be alive in September. They are dying right now. Look at them." Grace Fryer took the stand. She couldn't lift her hand to take the oath because her arm was shattered. She couldn't sit up straight. She had lost all her teeth. But she looked the company executives in the eye, the men who had told her it was safe, and she told her story. She described the taste. She described the lip-dip paint. The jury was horrified. The public was outraged. The company realized they couldn't win. The United States Radium Corporation settled. Grace and the other survivors were awarded $10,000 each, a fortune back then. and a $600 annual pension for the rest of their lives. But the money didn't matter. They knew they wouldn't live long enough to spend it. Grace Fryer died a few years later. She was only 34. But her death changed the world. Because of the Radium Girls, the government created labor laws that gave workers the right to sue their companies for dangerous conditions. Their suffering led directly to the creation of OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. If you work in a factory today, if you have safety goggles and gloves and warning labels, you have them because Grace Fryer stood up and fought. Grace Fryer and the Ghost Girls were buried in lead-lined coffins. The radiation in their bodies was so strong that normal coffins wouldn't contain it. Concrete was poured over their graves to stop the radiation from escaping. If you go to their graves in New Jersey today and you bring a Geiger counter, the needle will still jump. More than 100 years later, they are still glowing in the dark. They are sending us a warning from the grave. Safety is written in blood. This story is a reminder that corporations will always prioritize profit over people, unless someone is brave enough to say, no. Had you ever heard of the Radium Girls before? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want more true stories about history's dark secrets, hit that subscribe button. Thanks for watching.